Hello and welcome everyone to DRJ's webinar series. I'm Bob Arnold, President here at Disaster Cover Journal. Today's sponsor is Sungard Availability Services, and the topic is controlling the risks of a data center move. Before we get started, I want to review a couple housekeeping items. Today's session is being recorded. This recording will be shared with everyone a few days after the webinar. Attendees are also in a listen-only mode. If you would like to ask any questions, please use the question function located on the right-hand side of your screen. We'll answer as many of these questions as possible at the end of the session. Now I'd like to introduce you to Pam Stouffer. Pam has over 25 years of information technology experience. Pam is a distinguished technology change leader able to deliver the highest quality business, project, and technical leadership in a diverse range of technologies. She is experienced in strategic solution delivery, product management, and data center migrations. She also has a strong track record of implementing successful projects on time, working with all areas of an organization, building relationship with executives and in line of business leaders to identify key business issues to solve and promote business solutions. Concentrated in data center consulting for the past 15 years, Pam's past experience in IT management, complemented by a degree in electrical engineering, has enabled her to present as a high subject matter expert on all things data center related. And with no further introduction, I'd like to turn the mic over to Pam.
Thank you, Bob. Appreciate that. And today, as Bob mentioned, we wanted to talk about controlling the risk of a data center move. And the one thing that we must be aware of is you don't want to get to execution and all of a sudden ask yourself, why did we not know about this? That can be devastating, to say the least. First of all, let's talk about what actually encompasses a data center move. It can be various things. It can be the movement of one or more devices, up to and including an entire data center. Could be across town, could be in or out of a third-party colo, in or out of one of your data centers that may be across the country, or of course into a Sungard data center, which is pleasing for us. It also includes consolidation, and when I say consolidation, that could be through acquisition, divestitures, operational downsizing, maybe you're doing some decommissioning, which is changing the look of your footprint overall. What we hear today when we go into customers is, hey, I just don't want to be in the data center business anymore. You know, it's a headache. I want to pass that headache on to somebody else, whether that's data center maintenance, crack units, generators, security, monitoring. Could be part of those, could be all of those, but you just want to get it out of it. So that's when you really look at moving into a co-location. One of the questions that we'll be asking up front is, are you actually moving, literally just lift and shift, or are you actually looking at transforming your footprint, your organization when you get to the destination? So transformation certainly increases the risk. Maybe somebody on the team heard, hey, we're doing a data center move, so let me try to throw my project into it since we're going to have an outage, so might as well take full advantage of it. The more you try to stuff into that move, the more you can jeopardize keeping control of the move itself. So how we refer to it as with work streams. So you may want to categorize your work streams, take a look at those. Some may need to be included for various reasons. Some may not. They may either push your project deadline out to where that's not acceptable, or it may just raise the risk level so high that you just don't want to take that on at this point in time. We really want to lower the risk and take a look at the next 3 to 5 years. What do you want your end state to look like? And all the variables that are included in that. So as part of that, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this particular slide because it is very busy, but it talks about the 6 R's. And it does have high and low risk on the left-hand side there. As Bob mentioned, you will be getting a copy of this and of the recording, so you can spend a little more time digesting it. But the 6 R's are retain, retire, rehost, replatform, re-engineer, and replace. Like I mentioned, there may be some of the areas that, yes, we do want to include them as part of the move. But there may be others that, no, because of certain deadlines, we need to get out of a lease. We can't take on the risk of including those at this point in time. So let us move and then we'll tackle those projects. Some of the things that you may want to look at including is if you're looking at some of the net new gear. So you want to replace something. It may add a little bit of risk, but you have opportunity, especially in the network area, that you can build the new network out in the new location. You can do testing and validation, which gives you kind of a step up and lowers the risk overall that you've got the network in place. And then the move itself is much more application driven than it is network and application. Replication is another one. If you need to replace some of the storage, that's an opportunity to do some seeding, get the storage over there, and then you have the opportunity to incorporate that new equipment through upgrades, etc., to get that into your destination location ahead of time. So there are things that you certainly may want to include as part of the transformation, but the one emphasis is you want to be very careful and make sure that you understand, is the risk going up as I add these things in, or is it going to be something that I can manage or my team can manage as part of taking on this additional work? Let's ask ourselves a few questions. First one, do you have a budget? There's going to be a point in time when somebody's going to ask you about that. Do you need a plan? Well, I certainly hope you need one. And I think we all need a plan to stay on track. Do you know all the move elements? What's moving? Where's it moving? When's it moving? Those are questions we're going to ask ourselves and answer. Do you know all the build elements? And I just told you that maybe I want to get out of the data center business, so I'm putting those build elements onto someone who's running the co-location. So why do I even care about build elements? Well, when you're moving to a co-location, you still have build elements. Those may not necessarily be the brick and mortar, but they will be cabinets, space and power, some of the other elements. Have you gone through all the decision points? Let's see. And when do we need professional help? I don't want to say that every move will require professionals to come in, but I think you certainly need to step back, evaluate it, and understand when you need professional assistance to come in. If you answered no, or maybe you just don't know to any of these questions, we think that you have a significant risk to the day-to-day business if you take on the responsibility of doing a move. So let's step in and talk about them a little bit more. Do you have a budget? There's going to be an executive member of your team that's going to come to you and ask, what's the budget going to be for this move? You may say, well, okay, I think it's going to be. But the elements that go into that are going to be space and power, resources, whether it's your resources, resources that you outsource to, ongoing support. Now you're no longer potentially under the same roof, so you're at a remote location, potentially remote hands. Move cost, transportation, insurance, labor for additional assistance for rack and stack, cabling, OEM support. How does that change the vendors? What vendors need to be included? All of those items are going to be a line item in working to get the budget. And right now we're looking at, our teams are starting to put together here in Q4 budgets for 2020. So you want to make sure that you're evaluating all these things and not just taking a swag at it. Do you have a plan? Do you need one? Well, who says you need one? Have you talked to anyone in the business? How long can we tolerate an outage? Which systems are critical? You know, we certainly need to take a look at that and understand if the outage window needs to be minimized and you have systems that are critical, especially around when they can go down, how long they can be down, when they need to be available, you want to make sure you build those into your plan and everybody's aware of it and everybody is signed off that they know when those are unavailable, and all of that information has been communicated to the right teams, whether it's a business, whether it's end users. And then you may ask, well, I have somebody on my staff who's actually executed a move before, so they can help us out. A lot of times we see that, you know, there is someone on the team that has executed on a move, but they never want to do it again. Issues came up, they can certainly add to the experience, or sometimes it was a great experience for them and they are very much a benefit to the team to talk about what happened. When you call the professionals to reduce the risk, you certainly want to consider engaging professionals. And professional data center movers, we do this, my team does this day in, day out. We don't have another job. Primarily, all we do is everything around data centers, and the primary focus is on data center moves. When you're going to move your home, you may want to call a professional. Maybe you don't have a truck. Maybe you don't have a friend who has a truck. We don't necessarily have trucks, but we have the right partners engaged to be able to assist us in supplying the right truck, the right materials, the team that is experienced to be able to move your data center with all the care that anyone could ever give. And I will say, movers that move your home are not data center movers. They may come in and do a great job with shrink wrap, shrink your couch up, it doesn't get dirty or anything. The other thing on shrink wrap, you have pink versus white. Do you want anti-static? Of course you do, because you want to take care of your computer systems and you don't want static in your computer systems. Some of the move elements. This slide here is basically our methodology that we use, and we've been very successful at it. So the first one is discovery. So what we would do is we would come into your environment, talk to your team, do a physical inventory to understand what do you actually have, what needs to move, what doesn't need to move, what's going to stay, what's going to go, what's going to be decommissioned, what the priorities are around it, and that's going to jump us into the analysis. So once we know everything that you have, we're going to start looking at it saying, you know, is there any red flags? Is there anything we need to be aware of? We're going to start looking at how many moves do you need? We do have a cutoff that's really based on your outage tolerance to how much you can actually put into a move. Throwing resources at it is one thing, but actually getting it done efficiently is another. So we will certainly have the conversations around that. And then we'll start into the design, which is rack elevations, floor plan, what that's going to look like, and then jump into the move planning. That's when we start reaching out to the business and talking to them about what is your outage tolerance? What is moving? How's it moving? How long can it be down? Let's validate that with the people who actually use it. It may reach out to the end users, but normally it stays within the business. Once we get through the planning phase, we're going to jump right into execution. If we have the plan done correctly, everything's solid, execution should go smooth. We're going to execute the plan. We're going to unrack, pack, move, unpack, re-rack, cable, and we do need your folks specifically for testing and validation. We're not able to log into your systems. We're not there to test your applications. So we need to engage the business to do the testing and validation. There are some things that your network team, your IT team will take a look at, and but the testing and validation. Now, when we plug the last cable in or we rack the last piece of equipment, our team doesn't walk away. We stay with you through post-support. And post-support may be the network team is doing their testing and validation. They're walking through everything. They may be on site. They may be doing this remotely. If they're doing it remotely, they need someone on site to, maybe it's as simple as switch a cable, run a new cable that may have got overlooked as far as the cable map goes. Or it may be as simple as your guys are on site and we just need to run out and pick up some dinner for them. We don't leave you. We make sure that we're all in this together to support each other, and we're going to see you through all of your applications being up, running successfully, that your end users are able to go to work. Maybe that's Monday morning, whatever that looks like as part of the plan. The data center build elements. This was the one that if you really want to get out of the data center space, or if you don't, if it is in space of yours, there are still build elements around this. And when we talk about it, the first one is space. How much space do you need? How much square footage? How many cabinets? Do I need a cage? Do I not need a cage? Do I need a topper? Do I not want anybody going in over the top? How about under the floor? Can somebody come up under the floor into my space? You're going to have to talk to your security team and understand, are there certain security elements that I need to be aware of and consider when going out looking for space and contracting the space? And that's just a few of the items. Circuits. When do I need to order them? Well, if you're thinking about or talking about a move and you're talking about doing one maybe Q1 of 2020, I would say you need to order today or by the 1st of October. You're looking at normal installation for circuits runs anywhere from 60 to 120 days, probably worst case scenario. But you want to be able to get your circuit in, be able to do at least minimal testing and validation prior to. Once it gets dropped by the telco, you're going to need cross connections from the DMARC to your cabinet. And that's going to be the case whether it's in your location or a co-location. You're going to need to know the termination type. copper, fiber? What's the distance? Maybe that has an impact on what the terminating point is. You need to think about all of these. The circuit is usually one of the items, though, that will dictate when you can actually move. So if the circuit is taking longer to get installed, it may have something to do with pushing the date further out, potentially, if you are dependent upon those circuits being installed. Floor plan. Cabinets to go, network cabinets, storage, servers, code aisle containment. Where do you need to put them? Do you just kind of throw them out there like dice? Just let them, let's do 2 rows, 3 rows. It'll work. It really doesn't matter. It does matter. You want your floor plan to be efficient to support your cabling needs and to minimize the runs. For instance, storage. You may want storage in a particular area because in the next 3 to 5 years, you're going to be swapping out potentially a storage cabinet that's a vendor cabinet, and you don't want to be pulling it out of the center in the center row and winding it around to get it out of your cage or out of the space. You want it to where it's feasible that you can easily move those in and out. So those are some of the things when we start building the floor plan that we'll look at. What kind of cabinets are going in? Where do they need to be positioned to be most efficient in various ways? And that will actually help us to build a floor plan that we can use and then build on that. So that comes next to patch cabling versus structured cabling. When we talk about patch cabling looks more like home runs, usually copper. You can color code it for various things. Maybe you have a certain color for management, for network, for DMZ. You've got your uplinks back to the core. Structured cabling, however, when we talk about structured cabling, structured cabling usually terminates on a patch panel. So in terminating on a patch panel, it's cabling that I don't want to say cannot be removed, but normally it is stationary. It's going to go back somewhere to another patch panel, and your core is going to be plugged into that. It does, however, take up rack space. You need to be aware of it, but it does also minimize your patch cabling. And when I say minimize the patch cabling, you don't have 20-foot runs for patch cabling. You may have 5 to 7-foot runs from top to bottom of the cabinet. And then you also have another run, which is probably going to be in the network to your core. A lot of the structured cabling is either done by cabinet, or how we refer to it is by pod. So maybe you have 2 cabinets, 3 cabinets that you have a patch panel for, that then all the devices in that cabinet run up to that. Rack sizes. They come in different colors, heights, widths. Widths are normally 24 or 30. Standard is, if you just go out and shop and sign up at a colo, you'll normally get 24-inch width racks. That's fine, not a problem, but you really need to take a look at your network racks in particular. And from a professional standpoint, I personally always recommend 30-inch racks for the network, because you're going to have all this cabling that comes back in, whether it's with patch panels, whatever it may be, to get to your core network. And so pretty soon you're going to look like some kind of cable nightmare somewhere in there. So that 30-inch gives you a little more room to be able to dress things out, to have more room on the sides, to get the cabling in and out, especially in your network. Depth, you have 42, 48. Again, professionally, I personally like the 48s because that gives you a little more room for PDUs, cabling in the back. Do you put 2 PDUs? Normally you have A and B. You may put one on each side. You may put both of them on one side. In some circumstances, you may need 4 PDUs. And in that, if you've got a 42-inch, then you pretty much shove everything right up against your servers. So you want a little additional space to be able to work with those in the back and not have everything like crammed up, that every time you move something, you all of a sudden unplug something. Height, 42s, 48s again. These will affect the elevations. So a lot of people, when the 48U height first came out, they thought, oh, well, every 8 racks, I basically get another rack. So free rack space. Not necessarily the case. If you have patch panels, you need patch panels in there. So that eats up some of that space. The biggest thing on height is if you're moving things in the racks on a 48 high, do you have the space to get them through the door? Because a lot of your doors aren't high enough depending on where your data center really is. Power. PDU types, there's all types. Verticals, horizontal, 110s, 208s, metered versus unmetered. You may ask yourself, well, when do I need metered? When you really need to think about metered versus unmetered will be if you're moving to a co-location and all of a sudden now you don't have resources that are going to be there hands-on, you need to restart some of your equipment. And in that, what happens is you either have to use some type of remote hands, or you need your folks that are sitting at their desk to jump on a plane maybe, drive across town, to be able to go and do work periodically throughout the month, throughout the quarter. But if you have the metered, then there are things that they can use to log on, to be able to restart those themselves, and work just like they were sitting outside the data center and they never really have to go into it anymore. Before we start, let's talk about some move decision points. And these are some of the things that when we start the planning phase, I'm sure every customer, and if you're listening to this today, you already have in mind, this is kind of what I thought about and this is what I want to do. So racks. Are we going to unrack everything and rack it back at the destination? Or are we moving intact? Are we leaving it in the racks and just taking the racks by themselves? You can do either way. Cabling. Do you have a cable plan? Are you going to refresh? You're going to buy out new cables? Or are you going to reuse? Proprietary cables or off the shelf? So just to talk about that a little bit, when we talk about cabling, if anything is leaving the cabinet and you're moving intact, the recommendation is to replace those. And when I say replace, I'm specifically talking about Cat 6 and 10 gig fiber. If it's within the cabinet, maybe you have top of rack switching. So primarily a lot of the cabling, patch cabling, is intact within the rack. So we can leave that. We don't need to unplug it. We don't need to do anything. We can leave everything in place. We can secure the PDUs, whips, and take it as is. The proprietary cables, such as your storage connections, things like that, those are very specific, and they may need to be purchased if you're looking at replacing those from a vendor. So in those circumstances, we come in, we map them out as part of the cable map, and the only time that I would recommend potentially replacing it is, one, if it's too short, if it's going from one cabinet to the other, or you're changing the racking of the particular equipment, or you're going to have like 50 feet of cable laying on top or underneath your cabinet because you ordered some crazy length, or it came with some crazy length that you know, you were running it like across country instead of just to the cabinet next door. So for those instances, we really want to reuse the proprietary cables, and we want to make sure that we get them when we do the move, and you don't all of a sudden don't get to the other side and you don't have them. Power cables, C13, C14, C19, C20, I could go on and on. What do you need? We have customers, they go, oh no, we're not swapping out any power cables. Well, nowadays they have come out with some of the lockable power cables, which are very nice. They kind of clip in to the PDUs. We highly recommend those if you are swapping them out. If you're using 110 today and all of a sudden you're going to new PDUs that require 208 connections, you may need to purchase some replacement power cables as part of that. You need to understand what the requirements are for your PDUs. How many connections do you need? And that's one of the things in building the elevations that we'll come in and take a look at and say, you know, hey, you need XYZ C19s, you need XYZ C13s, and oh, by the way, the PDUs that you've selected don't have enough connections. So that's where a lot of people get into trouble when they're looking at all of a sudden they go from 2 PDUs, an A and B, to 4 because they didn't have enough of the right connection type to support whatever they're putting into the cabinet, chassis, things like that. Equipment warranties. Who's required? Well, IBM is pretty much required to be involved with any IBM equipment. Oracle, EMC Dell or Dell EMC, they're kind of changing their landscape a little bit, but primarily Dell does not need to be involved at all, but EMC may or may not. NetApp, they're not required to be in, but we do encourage you to open tickets with all of your vendors that you have maintenance contracts with, and make sure that it's called a site ID, that gets changed, because when your equipment phones home or needs replacement parts, whatever that may look like, you want to make sure that your vendor is going to the right location to actually swap out those parts. Staffing experience. I'll just use NetApp as an example. So NetApp doesn't require to be involved, and maybe you have staffing experience that they feel very comfortable in doing the shutdown process, the startup process, so you don't need them involved. But we would encourage you to open a ticket. So at the destination, if you run into any issues, then you already have a ticket open that you're actually going to be moving, and therefore support may be a little bit quicker because they're already aware of what's going on. Decommissioning. Does your CISO require chain of custody? Is there certificate of disposal? We provide a certificate of disposal, whether it's data or equipment, and in those cases, that's standard for us. And the chain of custody, we are with your equipment all the way through, and so we can make sure that what you gave us is actually what's going through the destruction process. And then it takes about 2 or 3 weeks, and we'll provide a certificate of disposal. Do you think we covered all the risk? Anything? A few things that we didn't review, and you've always heard the comments, the devil's in the details. There's some common risks that if you're doing a data center move yourself, and I will say before I started doing this professionally, I went through several moves, and so some of these things are very vivid to me, but they could stop you in your tracks, literally stop you in your tracks. The truck. You have a truck. Did I contract for a climate or a non-climate? Well, when do I need a climate? I'm only going across town. Probably you don't need a climate trailer if you're just going across town, but there may be certain circumstances that you need a climate, especially if you're going across country. Is it very humid outside? Are you going more than 2 to 3 hours? You may want to look at and evaluate the potential risk, or when you get to the destination, to let your equipment acclimate to the new temperature once you get it off the truck. From the truck, how about a dock? Does your building have a dock? Does the data center you're moving into have a dock? What about the truck size? Can I get that 53-foot trailer into that dock? Oh my gosh, I can't do it. So then what happens? If you go in some of the larger cities, you will notice periodically trucks backed up to each other, and they are offloading from a 53-foot trailer onto a small box truck, because usually those 53-foot trailers cannot get into a lot of the dock spaces. And we have the same thing at some of our locations, Sungard locations, that you can't get a 53-foot trailer in there, so therefore you have to offload into a smaller truck. Then you run into liftgate requirements. Nowadays, most trucks, no matter 53-foot trailer or a small box truck, most of them come standard today with lift gates. But you always want to make sure that if you need it, you request it, because you may not know when you actually need it. But I can guarantee if you don't have a dock, you do need a lift gate. So you might want to just jot that down. Weight can also be a challenge. How much weight am I trying to put on the lift gate to get it up? You want to make sure that you take those things into consideration when doing that. In those cases, you may need to reevaluate. I need to unrack the cabinets instead of moving the cabinets intact, because I've got them stacked too densely. I don't want to run into issues with the lift gate, anything like that. My racks, do they have wheels? Everybody's thinking, sure, don't all racks have wheels? They normally do, but I will say in California, you may be moving in or out of California. Not all racks have wheels. There are earthquakes. So as part of the standards in the data center, a lot of times they will remove the wheels and they will bolt the cabinets directly to the subfloor. So as part of that, the racks don't have wheels. So you can't just pick it up with a dolly, wheel it around, put it on a truck. You actually have to unrack everything and potentially take the rack with you without wheels. Several times we've actually taken the rack without wheels, had them order wheels, put the wheels on them if you're moving them to a place that you no longer have that concern or that requirement. Floor covering. Do I need any? If you're moving into a brand new office space and potentially have a data center somewhere in this new office, if you have to go through the carpet or you have to, you don't have a dock, you have to go in the front door, they've got brand new marble down, you need floor covering. We don't want to be the reason that we bust some marble or put tracks down the new flooring or roll up the carpet because of the weight of the cabinets. We don't want to be that person that causes those issues. We want to make sure we have the right floor covering, whether that's covering in the freight elevators, whatever that may look like. And so that's where we will walk through, make sure we understand what kind of dock area you have. Are we going to be going in the front door? What's the door height? Anything like that. So those are very important. And jumping into door height, you do want to make sure if you're moving things in and out, that it will fit through the doorways, both height and width, because you can't necessarily take the door jambs off just because you're moving some equipment through. Although I have had a customer who did that one time. So now, are you prepared? One thing I'd like you to remember, no two moves are alike. We do this daily. Every week the team goes out, they perform a move, and our methodology is very solid, but I can guarantee you that each move we do, there's a little bit of something that is different in each one of them. How can Sungard Availability Services help you? As Bob mentioned when he did the introduction, our team does everything data center related. So we have several areas that I'd just like to mention to you. Our team can come in and do a data center assessment. How the assessment can assist you is we really look at data center risk, resiliency. We pop the floor tiles. We look at your crack units. We get up on the roof. We look at all the areas that are physical components of the data center, security, hot spots. We take temperatures, airflow, everything around your data center and everything that's in it to make sure that you don't have anything that is going to put your environment at risk. We'll give you a report, do a presentation with the team. They will determine what risks are acceptable and what are not. We come in and we work with you on data center design and bills. And that's if potentially could be a small 8 to 10 racks, could be 10,000 square feet in a colo or outside. One of the more recent ones we did was 4,000 square feet in a 30,000 square foot co-location building. We come in, we work with your teams to understand everything that needs to go into that space, how to position it, work on structured cabling, cabinets, floor designs, rack elevations, anything that you could think of from a build perspective. And it doesn't necessarily have to be brick and mortar. Data center relocations, that was our primary focus today. So in the data center relocation space, we want to focus on discovery, analysis, planning, and execution. That will get you where you need to be. We'll understand all the risks. We'll put those out. We'll talk through them, make sure that you understand them, and then what's acceptable and what is not. We also provide data center decommissioning, and that is equipment data. We do eradication, shredding, DOD erase, and we provide CODs, certificate of disposals, for all of those services. Bob, I'd like to turn it back over to you for Q&A. Hopefully we've got some questions out there.
Wonderful. And again, if you do have any questions for Pam here today, you can locate the question panel on the right-hand side of your screen. We do have a few that have come in already. First question here, what is the time frame needed to include planning, etc., for a single move?
For a single move, we run anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks. And in that, it all depends on the size. That would be up to anywhere 10 to 12 cabinets is probably the max for a single move. We have done as high as 15, but of course, it is dictated by the outage tolerance, which is correlated with the distance that you're going from origin to destination.
All right, next question here. What are your contingencies for missed delivery dates on hardwares or damaged kit in transit? The plans can be airtight, but one oops at the physical level are often not thought about.
Oh, that's a tough one. When you are dependent on shipments, or as I mentioned during the presentation, especially on circuit delivery, things like that, you do have to look at those. But there are some things that, even though you've talked about it, you have it in the plan, you know, we can't control some of the shipments. We can't control a damage of a shipment in those areas. And when that happens, it may be just coming back to the table, having a discussion around, okay, let's look at this, let's talk through it. What are our options? And in laying out those options, you know, you maybe divert your plan a bit, and that may push your move date. So you have to reevaluate that. But those are things that, as they come up, you certainly will need to be very close to it and understand what plan B is, basically.
All right, next question here. In a co-located or shared environment, how do you best secure or restrict access to your specific space and racks?
The easiest way is to put your racks within a cage, but then you also have the same instance of, does it need to be secured from the top? Does it need to be secured under the floor? Those things are easily done through your co-location vendor, but you do need to make sure that you include your security team, talk to your CISO to understand what those are. All racks, if you just have shared racks on an open data center floor, they all have, you know, locks, either combination or keys, and there's security and monitoring from your vendor services that will ensure that those are secure. And also with the check-in, check-out, you always have to, as a customer, give access if those cages are open without you being present.
All right, next question here. What information is needed to price a data center move?
Primarily, you need to know the number of racks, the origin and the destination. So it's going to be the distance between point A and point B. You're going to need to look at how many moves are you talking about doing, and what kind of equipment are you moving. So an inventory list is key. And again, an estimate of the number of racks that you have today and the distance between them. We can give you a ballpark budgetary number to price that. If you want something more specific, then we certainly recommend coming out, doing a walkthrough, little more in depth to understand exactly what the plan entails, and not the plan per se, every detail of it, but high level, we can certainly give you a very good budgetary number around that. And then after a conversation or two, we can lock that in and give you a quote for the relocation.
All right, are there any further considerations you need to give to your DR environment if your primary location is the one moving?
I would say yes. And the reason I would say yes is there may be circumstances that you need to swing some of your applications over to your DR environment to have them up and available during that outage window. And again, it all depends on where you're going from point A to point B, how long are the systems going to be down. So you may want to initiate some aspect, it may not be all, it's just going to be your critical systems in using your current DR environment. And then of course you always have to swing back over. So that has to be part of the plan too. Do you do it after you get everything over and back up? Or do you schedule another outage to swing back from DR back over into your production environment?
All right, next question here is, in your opinion, what is the biggest risk in executing a data center move?
Oh, I can tell you that one very quickly. It's cabling. Cabling in itself, because most people, they don't really look at how much time it takes to cable. What they'll say is, oh, you know, a couple hours to cable everything up. That is not the case. Even if you have 2 to 3 cabinets, it'll take anywhere from 8 to 10 hours to do those 2 to 3 cabinets. So cabling can be one of the items that if you have not done a data center move before, and I'm talking specifically patch cabling, if you have not done a data center move before, it can trip you up on your outage window that you specified specifically. So that's why if there's certain things that need to be up sooner, you want to make sure that those priorities are listed and we talk about those and make sure that they're out there.
All right, wonderful. Some great information shared here today. There are several questions we did not get to. I responded that we will handle these and follow up with everyone after the webinar here is ended. So any parting words here today, Pam?
I appreciate everyone's time today, and you will have my contact information. So if you are looking at doing a data center move, either in the near future or maybe you're still 12 to 18 months out, feel free to give us a call. Let's get engaged and let's talk through what needs to be taken into consideration for you to be successful, because we certainly want everyone to be successful when you're doing a data center relocation.
All right, wonderful. Thanks again, everyone, for your attendance here today. We again hope you gather some great information from today's webinar. DRJ would also like to thank Pam for her time here today, as well as Sungard Availability Services for sponsoring today's webinar. Again, we will be emailing everyone a link to the recording, and you may view that recording as frequently as you wish or share it with your peers. If you have any additional questions, please contact Disaster Recovery Journal. Thank you again, and this now ends today's webinar.